Welcome into the Speeding in the Pits podcast, episode 2, with myself, Wyatt Williams, and also co-host Connor Klon Huberty. How are we doing today, sir?
Not too bad, brother. How are you doing?
I'm great, man. I'm great. Had a good day of work. Ready to talk some racing. We got all kinds of stuff on here. We've actually got our first interview of this podcast. We'll bring that up here in just a second, but we're going to talk about last week's race at Bristol. Klon has quite the ensemble about that. It's going to be great. I can't wait to hear.
Things to say.
I can't wait. We're going to talk about the Xfinity series. We saw Dale Jr. come back. Ty Norris, who you predicted this last week, Klon, he ends up going exactly where you said. We'll bring that up. We're not going to say where yet, but we'll talk about that. Bubba Wallace gets an extension. There was a seat swap. I mean, we just had a crazy week in NASCAR. And, of course, we do have an interview that will be with Justin Mondeik, who raced at Bristol this following week in the Truck Series, finished, I believe, 28th.
Correct.
Yeah, 28th. So we'll have Justin on. He'll be on here in a little bit. So once we bring him on, we'll have that whole interview. It'll be great. And we're going to preview Kansas this upcoming week, talk about some of the upcoming races here. The round of 12 is so interesting. I mean, you've got a mile and a halfer, arguably the best mile and a halfer, Talladega, and a weird mile and a half / road course. So, and it's reconfigured this year too. So we're going to break down all that. We're going to talk about our picks for this weekend as well coming up. But to get into this, Klon, I understand you have quite the bone to pick with NASCAR about this next-gen car. If you want to go ahead, sir, the floor is yours.
I appreciate it. Thank you for letting me have the floor for this one. Week 2 of the podcast, not going to stir up too much, but as we go along with this, I'm sure I mentioned it last week too, not the world's biggest fan of the next gen. And there's no better example of it than this past weekend, at Bristol. And I don't know. There's a lot of things, a lot of directions you go with this. I'm a little bummed out that there's just no word from NASCAR and seemingly no effort to fix this thing. And the reason I'm talking about this is, and Denny Hamlin brought this up on his podcast, so credit to him. But we had Todd Gilliland this past weekend running, I think it was 32nd or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Wyatt. But
no, that was about where he was. It was at the back of the pack.
And just supposedly a bad car for the weekend. And at the end of the race, towards the very end, Kyle Larson, I mean, this is the equivalent to winning a football game 75-0, like just put it on everybody all night. Todd Gilliland, who was supposed to be terrible, was only running like a hundredth of a second off the pace of Kyle. And he's in 32nd and 4 laps down or whatever it was. So if that tells you anything, the race isn't going to be all that entertaining. There's no disparity in speed throughout the field. These guys aren't going to be able to pass each other. They're not going to be able to catch each other. It's just everybody's going to be 2 or 3 car lengths back all night, just riding around, chasing each other. So Bristol's a perfect example of that. It's probably not the best track in the first place for the next gen. There's certainly many others that we'll run into throughout the course of these playoffs, even throughout next year. But yeah, just really frustrated that NASCAR is not making more of an effort, and we just continue to talk about tires and Goodyear and that whole thing. And I talked about them last week, but there's just seemingly no fix in sight, and it's just really frustrating as a fan. I'm hoping there's other people with me on this one too, but it's starting to get old.
I'm right there with you. I mean, it's just I've given up all hope that we're going to have a consistent next gen short track series of races. Like we had the great one in Bristol, and that all had to do with tire fall off. That's all it was. There was something weird about that mixture, and they said they're bringing the same tire this last weekend, and so obviously there's going to be more rubber on the track because ARCA, Truck, and Xfinity ran there before, so obviously there's not going to be as much tire fall off. I'm not expecting these things to rip apart like they did in the spring, but give me something. There was 0 tire fall off at all, and it's just frustrating, and it is totally the next gen car. I'm done blaming, or at least looking in the direction of Goodyear for blame,
right?
Because it's not up to Goodyear. You were mentioning the Actions Detrimental podcast. I love what they were talking about there earlier. It's not up to Goodyear to go in and save NASCAR because they've got this horrible next gen car that just can't run short tracks. It's not up to Goodyear to come in and play crutch for this terrible car that just has zero tire fall off at these short tracks. It's not up to them. At some point, we have to look at NASCAR. We have to do something different with this next gen car. Denny was talking about it today. I don't mean to keep mentioning that podcast, but Denny was talking about it as well. It's a great podcast. Denny was talking about it as well, about, you just like at some point we have to stop looking at NASCAR and we have to start looking at maybe a next gen 2.0 car, something different. Something has to be done about this car, or we're just going to sit in this situation. We're going to sit here just like this every single short track. We're going to leave it. We're going to be mad. Now, they are saying there's a different tire mixture for the round of 8 race at Martinsville. We'll see. I don't know.
Heard that story before.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Like, I don't want to sit here and get my hopes up and then no tire fall off at all. We've got the guy running in dead last, a tenth of a second off from the guy who's literally like, Kyle Larson, like you mentioned, that was the equivalent of a 70-0 football game. I mean, that 5 team showed up and they dominated. They did what they do. They've got the best crew chief in NASCAR. They've got the best driver in NASCAR and the best team in NASCAR. And they showed it again. I mean, pure domination. And still at that, when you've got this car that is running away from everyone, at the end of the race, they're barely outrunning a car in the 30s. It's ridiculous. It really is. And it's making it tough to watch for even the passionate race fans like ourselves. And I hate that. Like, I NASCAR already gets such a bad rap in so many ways. Oh, it's just left turns, all of this. I can't watch racing. It's so boring. It already gets this bad rap from so many different sports fans. But now we're going to bore the passionate guys. Now we're going to go bore the people like ourselves who've been watching it our entire lives and have loved it, because the short track package is so bad. It is so unbelievably bad. It's horrible.
Well, and it's one thing too, like you said, the passionate fans. Like I'm a diehard. I bleed for the sport. Like I'll be here until NASCAR is not a thing anymore. I'll be here longer than that, whatever. But it's hard to say all these things and talk about all this, and you hear all the owners and everybody that we hear in the media in the off season and the last couple of years about how expensive this next gen car has been and how expensive these parts and pieces they have to buy from all these suppliers are, and it adds up quick, and this whole thing, when the Xfinity series is staring you right in the face as like the old school traditional NASCAR. This is what we're used to. This is something that is more entertaining in a lot of people's eyes. I'm not necessarily saying all of the time, and the Xfinity series has their clunkers of races too, but that's a stock car that races in a stock car racing series. Like, it's right in front of your face. I'm not saying throw the next gen out completely and take on the Xfinity series car and make that cup, but like, why diverge so far from what made you unique, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and completely adopt basically an IMSA spec racing sports car, essentially, is what the next gen is. It's frustrating from the beginning. I'm not saying the next gen's dead, but it's time to do something. Otherwise, Bristol's not far away from being in that conversation that Richmond's in and just lost a date to Mexico City. Are we seriously going to live in a world where Bristol's only going to have 1 race a year?
What are we
talking about? But we're living in that world. You're telling me 95,000 people are going to show up next spring for the spring race because this one was so good? No. Why would somebody that doesn't really know much about the sport, why would they go next year again to even the night race? Like,
you're 100% correct. You're 100% correct. The trend
is staring you in the face if nothing happens. And I'm not saying next year, but 5-10 years from now, you're asking for trouble, and that's concerning to me.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And we've got another complaint here that we got to go over. We're starting off with our complaints, getting all the negative out of the way. Let's just dump it all out here first. And it has to do with the Xfinity series. First off, love seeing Dale Jr. back in a car, and he ran very well. But here's the problem: we wouldn't know. We wouldn't know that he ran well. Why wouldn't we know? Because it was on the CW, which I don't know. It's so frustrating to me, because we're trying our hardest to get NASCAR to this place. Again, back to my argument just a minute ago. We're trying to bring in this new audience of NASCAR fans. We're trying to expand out and find this new generation of NASCAR fan. The new generation of NASCAR fan does not watch antenna television. They don't. They simply don't. The
Right.
antenna television is dying out as it is. So why are we entertaining that? Why are we going in that direction? I do not understand. I didn't understand when they did the deal. And this right here just really solidifies it even more. The fact that Dale Jr.'s racing, people want to watch, and they can't.
Yeah, potentially his last race ever in NASCAR too. But I guess for this one, I don't have as much of a bone to pick with NASCAR for this. Like, sign your media deal, get what you need financially to make it work. And CW obviously stepped up to the plate for that and made it work for the Xfinity series. But my problem was actually with NASCAR Twitter. There's a lot of you geniuses that live on the internet that like to tell people when they're wrong and tell you what the right answer is. The CW, if you're a streaming TV household like we are here up in Minnesota,
Like 90% of American households nowadays. Sorry, go
you
ahead.
can no, you're good. And to prove like even more to that point, you can download the CW app. That's great. The CW doesn't have a live stream capability, so there was no way to watch it in real time. You could watch it the next morning, but like I could do that on YouTube. So like, what difference does that make?
Why would I not just watch the highlights on YouTube? Exactly.
Right. And then you geniuses that were also pointing out that it is an antenna channel, like you said, Wyatt. I saw plenty of people commenting under that, that, yeah, if you did use the internet for that antenna channel, which you could look it up just through a web browser, if your zip code didn't provide it, which it was based on geography, and I don't know how that works, but it wasn't working for everybody either. So that wasn't a solution for everyone 100% as it was. So, again, not as big a problem with NASCAR. I'm sure we'll figure something out with CW. It's just we probably should have checked some of those boxes before the first race being Dale Jr.'s potentially last race from Bristol ever. Like, we maybe should have had a better plan in place. But yeah, I'm more just frustrated with people on Twitter trying to tell me how to watch TV. Like, I don't do it every day normally. Like, I know how that works. So I don't know, just ridiculous. But yeah, still unbelievable in 2024. I can't watch a race in real time, but is what it is. I suppose they'll figure that out.
It's absurd, and it needs to be figured out, and I do think they will as well. But I mean, overall, I was just pumped for this weekend at Bristol. I was pumped.
Yep.
I mean, we had the great race in the spring with the tire fall off and everything, and it's like, man, this is gonna be cool. Dale Jr.'s coming back, and it felt like everything I was excited for was a dud. Just a complete fall flat on its face. Like, just it's frustrating.
Yep.
It's
Truck race was
totally
fun.
yeah, truck race, excuse me, I can't speak. Truck race was a lot of fun, and we're going to have one of the guys who participated in that race coming on here in a little bit. But real quick before we move on from last week's recap, we had 4 drivers that were eliminated from the playoffs. Brad Keselowski being one of them, Martin Truex Jr., who really just put himself in that situation, which I
Talk
can't
about
even.
ripping your heart out.
Oh, so bad. And Ty Gibbs, of course, and Harrison Burton. Again, I'm going to stick with my point I made last week. Valiant effort from the 21 car. The fact that they're even here, the fact that we're sitting here in a race where we are deciding who's making a round of 12, and they're even in the conversation, is a win. That's a win.
Their highlight wasn't making the playoffs. I mean, I'm great for the team. Like, take that as an accomplishment. It's amazing. Their highlight, you're telling me the Wood brothers winning their 100th race as a team in Daytona.
Yeah. That's the highlight.
We
100%.
already got what we needed. Yeah, we already
Yeah.
got what we needed out of them. That was awesome.
That was it. And yeah, no, it was great. But yeah, no, just a weekend that was supposed to be a 10 and ended up being a 2. I don't know. It was frustrating. It was frustrating as a NASCAR fan who, man, I'm out here vouching. I'm out here vouching for it. I'm telling my friends, hey, you got to watch. I got a buddy who hates NASCAR, but he's a huge Michael Jordan fan, and he's from the Chicago area. And I'm like, dude, MJ has a team. He shows up to the races. You know, like Tyler Reddick runs the UNC Blue car. Like, I'm out here vouching every week. I'm trying my hardest, but it's like at some point we can't sit here and defend it anymore. It's like, man, it's just this was a stereotypical NASCAR weekend. A lot of left turns, a lot of nothing is what I would say.
In terms of
But now,
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
especially when it comes to Cup. But now we'll move on to some hot topics here, some headlines. We talked about it last week a little bit. Ty Norris leaving his former employer there at Trackhouse, and now you predicted it. You said it. You told him everybody where he was going, Klon, and he's there now. So I'll leave the floor to you, brother. What happened with Ty Norris this week?
I think it's just a case of I don't want to speak for Ty Norris. Don't know him personally. Don't know what he's doing with his career or where he wants to go with it. But I think it's one of those things for him where it's like that football coach that you need to build the program up, but once the program's built, what's next kind of thing. And I think he really helped Trackhouse, Justin Marks, and those guys get established, build their team up. Built a race shop out in Nashville, a whole thing, or they're working on that still, I guess, or wherever they are now. But he was really a part of the foundation. And now Trackhouse is pretty established. Daniel's obviously in the round of 12. Ross has been in the championship 4 before, like teams being competitive. Colleague seems like a team that could use that. They started with a lot of momentum a few years ago, kind of running out of gas. So a guy like Ty Norris, I don't know what the connection would be if there's something else there, but just seems like a good fit to kind of get them turned around and headed in the right direction too. And I mean, his resume speaks for itself. So I would keep an eye on Colleague now because he obviously knows what he's doing.
Absolutely. He definitely does know what he's doing. And yeah, Colleague is going to be a threat moving forward. Again, we're seeing these lower tier NASCAR teams that are getting these big hires. We're seeing Spire bring in Rodney Childers. Now we've got Ty Norris headed to Colleague. Like NASCAR is becoming extremely competitive. This again, like I said, I'm vouching for it. I'm pulling for it. I'm here. I'm trying my best to get people interested. And these are the moves that will get people interested, having a more competitive race field. And that's what this is. I think this hugely improves Colleague and their entire organization. And it's a big move for them. But also, speaking of some contract things, Bubba Wallace gets his extension at 23-11. Kind of what was your reaction to that? What did you think of seeing the 23 man stay in the 23?
I think it makes a lot of sense. I think Bubba's been nothing but a great fit for them from the beginning in the 23 car. I think the sponsorship and everything that comes along with that is, again, speaks for itself. Uh, why would you get rid of him, to be honest with you? I mean, I think he's improving. I do definitely think Bubba's gotten a lot better at places like road courses just in general. I do think he's becoming a better race car driver. And granted, yeah, the argument is everybody has enough time, they'll eventually figure it out. Well, we'll talk about somebody in the next segment here that I'll disagree with that. But I think Bubba only makes sense. I think we're seeing a team mature and take a next step. Rumor has it 2311's adding a third car next year. I don't know why you wouldn't want an established guy like Bubba who is going to give you a top 16 roughly effort, basically almost playoffs every year at this point, and hopefully better going forward to be a foundation piece of your team with Tyler Reddick. So I wouldn't start over. I wouldn't go younger. I think it's a good fit, and whoever they add in that third car can be that young prospect and build from there.
Yeah, and every year you've seen this progression and improvement from Bubba. And I think that's really what it was.
Big time.
Was that every year he's gotten just a little bit better. Yes, he made the playoffs last year, didn't make them this year, but that was because of some midseason struggles. If they would have ran in the middle of the season like they did at the very end, I mean, dude, they're at the end of the season. They were a top 10 car out there every week. I mean, for the final 5-6 weeks of the season, every week it seemed like they were up there in the mix. They were running really well. So yeah, it does. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, he's a great fit there at 2311. I know Michael Jordan absolutely adores the guy. And yeah, he's continued every year. That's what separated it.
And
Every year
Bubba's
there's
what?
been this consistent improvement.
And he's what, 31, maybe 30?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
race car driver
Fairly.
years, he's got most of his career ahead of him still. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not worried about anything like that. He's got plenty of time to put it together, and I think he's driving his best races right now. I mean, you look Saturday night. I mean,
He was moving.
he was towards the end of the race. He might have been fastest car on the racetrack for a while there. I mean,
Yeah.
he's doing great. Bristol is a good track for him anyway, but you start putting nights like that together consistently, he's going to be in that round of 12, round of 8 conversation sooner than we think. And I don't think that's crazy to say.
No, and the big thing too with this playoff format, if he can find a way, at some point in the regular season to have a great day and find a win. I mean, that with this playoff format, that puts you in.
Right.
You did it. As long as you can get one win. So moving on now to what you were mentioning earlier, we had a very interesting situation this week in NASCAR. Something that, I mean, have we ever seen this before? How long has it been? Like I in my time watching NASCAR, I've been watching since 2004, 2005. I don't remember a seat swap like this, where what we've seen between Corey LaJoie and Justin Haley with Spire and Rick Ware Racing.
I I don't remember anything specifically either. But I do remember people from that time just going back and reading stuff since this was announced that this did happen in the early 2000s more, and we just probably didn't hear about it and see about it as much. But yeah, definitely not something that's happened recently. Like in the last 10, 15 years, absolutely not. Like we had a trade alert. Like there's no trade deadline in racing. We definitely had one though.
We
So
had a Woj
just
bomb from
crazy.
Bob
Yeah.
Cockris. It
Yeah.
was great. It was cool to see. I mean, and really the big winner of this, I think both drivers do win, and I think both teams do win because number one, we'll start with Spire. Spire is done. They're out of it. They're like, dude, we've got two young up and comers, and you're wrecking every week. So and causing us problems with other drivers. So I think Spire was done. They needed to move on. Rick Ware Racing now gets a bigger name in the door, I think, and Justin Haley will now get a much better opportunity and goes back to Spire and gets to prove how great of a racer he's been. I mean, there's been times this year where Justin Haley has run really well. I mean, really solid at times, and very much outperformed his equipment that he's in, and that's what I think has really made this happen. And I think that they're probably going to end up sticking with him for a while. I know they've said he's going to be in the car next year as well for Spire, but I mean, this could be a long-term thing. It really could.
It absolutely could be. And correct me if I'm wrong, Wyatt, but just those everybody listening, obviously, the details of this. So the 7 cars trading in theory, or I guess literally in a way, but trading Corey LaJoie to Rick Ware Racing to fill the 51. And Rick
Yes.
Ware is trading Justin Haley from the 51 to the 7 at Spire. Now, like you just alluded to, Justin Haley's ride for the 7 is guaranteed next year. Corey's is not.
It is
Corey does
not.
not necessarily have a contract for next year right
Yeah,
now.
just a straight up driver for driver trade is the way it seemed to be. It's not football or anything like that to where they throw in picks or anything like that. So yeah, I think just straight up driver for driver. And Haley will be in the 7 car again next year. I believe they said yes, the 7 car. They may
Yep.
okay, I
Him
didn't
and
think they
Rodney
switched.
is a done deal.
So that's going to be huge. I mean, that's going to be really cool to see.
Monster team.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's going to be really interesting to see Justin Haley with a great crew chief like that, and back in some solid equipment, and I'd say better equipment, because when he was at Spire was not what they are today. So not even close. So
No,
I think this is a
no.
huge move for Justin Haley's career, especially if this is a stepping stone place. If this is a place where he goes and races for 2 or 3 seasons, makes the playoffs once or twice, wins a couple of races here and there, I mean, Justin Haley could find his way into a really solid gig in a multi-year contract. So a huge move for them.
You
It
can
really
pencil me in right now. He's in the round of 12 next year. For
okay. All
sure.
right.
Like
I like it. Stick it out.
not
Yeah.
even a debate.
Yeah.
He
Put it
absolutely
out
is.
there. I
Like
love it.
I think it's a great fit. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think Rodney Childers, who's going to be his crew chief, is phenomenal. Like that car is going to be tough. Inspire's only getting better as a whole too. You're seeing that with the other 2 guys, but yeah, they're heading in the right direction for sure.
Yeah, and they're like you said, they're only getting better, but B, now they've brought in Rodney Childers, and Rodney Childers makes you even better. So I mean, this is going to be a dangerous team next year, but all in all, I think it's a win-win for everybody. And for Corey, the last part that I hadn't mentioned yet, I think it is a win for Corey too, because he kind of gets to step out of the limelight, and it is a less pressured ride to where there's not going to be the expectations anymore or anything like that. So he's going to be able to find himself again, I should say. I don't know. I still think no matter what, I mean, short of him going out and winning a race in this 51 car, which I'd put all the money in the world. I'd sell my house right now and put it on it that he won't. But short of him going out and winning a race, I don't see them extending him, and he ends up in it with an Xfinity team or a truck team next year, which I think somebody at that level would definitely pick him up. I don't see that being a problem for him to find a ride down there. But this is just a guy who's had so much potential, it seemed like at one point, especially when it came to super speedways. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
there were several super speedway races where he was up there. He was involved all day long, raced really well. So, it is literally a win-win for all four parties, both drivers and both teams. Everybody in some way made themselves or their career just a little better and is giving themselves a second shot. So that
I
was
agree.
big. And we will be having on Justin Mondeik here soon. He'll be joining us very shortly. But before we get to Justin, we're going to go ahead and look ahead to Kansas, which Justin will be racing at Kansas as well. We'll talk to him about that. But looking here into the round of 12, we got three races, three very interesting races. Three that are going to be action-packed and have some crazy things that come with them. But we will touch on that here in just a minute. Sorry, Justin is joining us right now, so I'll bring him on. All right, Justin, can you hear us, buddy? How are we doing? We can't hear you, Justin. Let's see here. These mics are weird sometimes. Technology is not always
Classic
fun.
technology. Yep.
Classic technology. Go ahead and move Justin around here. I'm not sure why it's not firing. Justin says here he's not on mute. Give us 1 second here. We will get this back up and going. Let me try and take him out and rejoin him back in. Maybe that will work. There we go. Justin, can you hear us, buddy? Okay, Justin can hear us. We can't hear him. I'm not sure. We're getting somewhere. We are getting somewhere. Let's see. Bear with us for 1 second here, trying to get Justin's audio up and going. Justin, if you want, buddy, try and exit out and re-click on the link. See if that would work. And I'll throw you back on here once it comes up. So we'll have Justin rejoin us here momentarily. For the time being, though, we'll resume our talks of Kansas again. But yeah, no, an interesting round of 12 that's coming up. 3 big races, 1.5 miles at Kansas, a super speedway at Talladega, which is always an interesting race. And of course, the Charlotte Roval, which always makes for some crazy stuff happening. So, I mean, what kind of things are you looking forward to here with this round of 12?
My head immediately goes to just I guess how similar this round is compared to the last one. I think you can take away a lot of I don't want to say a mirror of a comparison. The tracks are obviously in a little bit different order, but you have 1.5 miles, which is going to give you maybe the quote unquote truest test of racing here in the round, and a wild card with Talladega, and you go to the road course again with the Roval or hybrid, whatever you want to call it. So kind of a fun mix that way again. But yeah, just opportunity for some wild cards. We'll say that with a couple of those races on the back end.
Absolutely. I'm going to try and Justin joined us again. I'm going to try and throw Justin on here again. Justin, can you hear us, bud? There we go. We got Justin Mondeik. Perfect. All right. Justin, how's your day going today, buddy?
Good. Pretty busy, as you know, but I appreciate you having us on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us, man. And yeah, you are a busy guy. I mean, you just were at Bristol this last week, went over to Minnesota, won a race there at Elko. I mean, do you have an off switch?
Not really. It's been honestly pretty wide open the last 3-4 weeks. A lot of moving parts behind the scenes, and Bristol went really well for us, and it's just been a lot of traveling back and forth to Mooresville, North Carolina, and coming back to work, and then I was sitting before Bristol.
Oh, we lost him.
I don't know. Am I back? Did I lose you?
We're back.
Okay. I don't know if it's your connection or
got
mine.
him.
I'm sure it's
No, you're good. No worries. Do we have Wyatt back here?
I
no,
can't hear
Wyatt's
Wyatt.
silent.
I can
Oh
hear you,
boy.
Connor.
Oh, no worries, man. Justin,
There
I'm
we
going to
go.
ask you a question while we're waiting for Wyatt. So I obviously we tuned in, watched Thursday night. Didn't know you were up in my neighborhood dominating in Minnesota this weekend too, but congratulations on that. But watching the race Thursday night, I was tapped into your guys' audio. Have you heard the phrase "wrapping the bottom" enough for a
Yeah,
lifetime from Thursday
it,
night?
yeah, it was definitely a lot. It's I don't know. They drive a lot different than a super late. They can't really arc in as much, and you can't super late. You kind of arc it in, get it set on the right front, and then kind of get it pointed and shoot. And truck's not like that. They got a little bit lower entry. You got to load the right front different on entry to get it kind of to wrap. And it definitely was a different driving style from what I'm used to. So it was kind of adjusting throughout practice, and qualifying didn't go the best for us, but constantly learning every lap in the race. And I felt like we could have been more aggressive at times, but really just had to play it safe for getting our NASCAR clearance, because they definitely have us under a microscope right now. So just trying to go out there, log as many laps as we can, be respectful to the leaders and the playoff drivers, just so we could get cleared for Kansas.
Absolutely. And looking ahead to Kansas, kind of what things do you take away from Bristol leading into Kansas? Now you've got a week in the truck under your belt. Do you feel more comfortable now heading to Kansas?
Yeah, I think so. It's going to be a lot different, right? You go from a short track truck to an intermediate race truck, and and you learn kind of every single lap. I've been trying to do as much laps as I can on my iRacing rig here at home, but it just doesn't equate to what the truck actually feels like or what you're going to see. But at least from a visual aspect, it can help a little bit. But just being comfortable more at Kansas, knowing kind of what to expect going in, just working with the pit crews and pit stops and all your pit road speed, that just kind of will help going into this next week.
Yeah, and you mentioned the sim there. I definitely wanted to ask you about that. You didn't get to run in the truck at all. You go down for practice qualifying in the race. What was that like, trying out the sim and just pretty much just getting thrown into the fire and having to just rock and roll with it?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, honestly. Like once you hop into these trucks, they have decent power, but it's not like a ton of power. They're definitely momentum based. You have to keep your momentum up, and you can't really scrub any speed. But just being thrown into it, it was hard with only 15 minutes of practice. So by the time the 15 minutes are up, you're finally like getting, I guess, comfortable. Not that you didn't feel comfortable, it's more just getting comfortable with the truck and the racetrack, and then practice is done. And then you go qualifying and tried to arc it in a little bit, both laps, to get a decent roll speed and drive off, but that didn't help. It didn't react well to how we had the truck set up. So kind of put us behind. So I was a little bit disappointed after qualifying, but had to regroup for the race, and we were able to go forward in the race. So that felt good, just learning every single lap. But then we had some pit stop stuff going on, and there was struggling getting some 4-tire stops. So every time we had to come back in, then we had to start at the tail end of the longest line and kind of pass the same trucks that we've been passing all night. So definitely got a lot of practice passing trucks, which probably didn't hurt our view from NASCAR. They show that we could do it and do it safely.
Yeah, you bring that up, Justin, and thank you for the segue. But you mentioned that clearance from NASCAR, and obviously last weekend being your first race, next weekend being obviously your second. What is that clearance process like? Is that something once it's done for you here in the next week, or is it a year-long thing, or just kind of walk us through what that really looks like?
So going into this, you can't make your first NASCAR truck start in a playoff race. and Milwaukee and now Bristol are all the way through. So we're 2 races into the playoffs. So in order to get your clearance to get started, you have to start at a half mile. So the only half miles that were left on the circuit were Bristol and then Martinsville. But the way the schedule was, we had been working with a few teams, and the availability came up at Young's Motorsports to run the O2 truck at Bristol. And we weren't even considering Bristol, honestly. It just kind of fell on our lap. We were kind of looking more towards Martinsville. So we had called NASCAR. You have to send in your resume. You have to get a couple references. You have to have meetings with NASCAR, kind of go through all your stuff of what you've accomplished and all the years racing. They sit down with their panel. They review it. And then they had to go to the series director and get that approved. So if they approved us for Bristol. They said if Bristol went well, that there'd be a high likelihood that we'd be approved for Kansas, which was a big deal because then normally you have to go a half mile, mile and a half, and then the super speedways. But if we could get cleared after Bristol, we could go straight to Kansas, which is a mile and a half. So then we could just waiver through the mile, which is a big deal. And then if Kansas goes well, they'll clear us for Talladega the following week. So we'll just kind of see how Kansas goes. I'm still working together on the backside here to put some deals together to make Talladega happen. But right now we're just focused on Kansas and see where that takes us. But it's more just to get cleared here on the front side because we're really looking at opportunities and deals for 25. And it just kind of came earlier here in 24. So just kind of work through this, get our clearance, and then work with some of our corporate partners and go out and find some new ones, hopefully, that we can look into 25, because then we should be cleared for any size racetrack or any track that NASCAR goes to, because you don't want to go to the table with a sponsor and say they want to go to Daytona in February and you're not cleared to go yet, right? So that was more of just to kind of get our clearance out of the way here in 24.
Absolutely. And kind of what things, I know obviously you're saying here you got to have a good race at Kansas to move on then to Talladega. So kind of what things are you preparing for now? What things are you doing in the moment to ensure that you can take that next step to Talladega?
I think really just go and do what we did at Bristol. Just really stay clean, kind of be overly cautious, passing trucks, leaders. Kansas is going to be a lot more strung out with Bristol. I mean, once at Bristol, we started so far back that by the time you get within 30 laps, the leaders just have such a pace that it's hard to hold them off. And then once they start coming, you pretty much waste 15 to 20 laps yielding to the top 10 that are coming by, right? But at Kansas, I think it'll be a little more stretched out. So I think we'll have a better shot at staying on the lead lap early. Hopefully we could qualify within the top 25. And there's just going to be a lot of learning. I mean, you're running 185 miles an hour coming into turn 1 at Kansas. So there's definitely going to be a sense of the draft. I've got some experience with that in the late model, but it's definitely going to be a lot different. So I'm sure there's going to be a learning aspect to it, just feeling what it's like behind other trucks. You kind of get aero tight. I could even feel it at Bristol on a half mile. So I'm sure that's only going to get larger at Kansas.
Yeah, and you were talking about some of the differences there between racing in tracks where you draft and heading into turn 1. That's crazy. What did you say going into turn 1 at?
Yeah, it's like mid 180s at Kansas.
That's outrageous. Taking a turn at 180 miles an hour just sounds crazy. But kind of you race short tracks here in Wisconsin. You do a great job at that. Kind of what are some of the similarities between racing late model and truck? I know obviously there's a lot of big differences, but kind of what were some of the things that you were able to recognize and use from your late model experience while at Bristol?
I think just from the short track aspect, that probably makes you feel the most comfortable just because we have the most experience on short tracks, as you know. So I think going in, it wasn't really the worry of like, you can't do it or you don't know what to expect. It was more of just, you didn't know what to expect in the truck and how that feels different in a late model. But you know, the line, you know, where you're picking up the throttle and your brake pressure and all that, if you're going to trailer brake or whatever you're going to do for your driving style. But I think it's just, the truck's close to 1,000 pounds heavier than our late models. So the trucks, everything, they just feel lazier. You can't feel the adjustments as much. Everything's just kind of a split second later on the reaction. So I think it's good. I think I learned a lot, honestly, at Bristol, because we came back at Elko, as you know, and you come back and I felt like I could feel my late model so much more just with that weight difference. And it's like, we really dialed it in Saturday and had a really good run at Elko. And I think it'll only continue to help us in the future running more truck races, because I'll get used to that speed. And then when you come back home, I mean, even when we go to La Crosse here for Oktoberfest, you're still 120 miles an hour plus at La Crosse, but it's like you might come home and that might feel slow, right? It just might help you just from a comfort level and kind of airing it out a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Just crazy perspective from you, Justin. Thank you for that. But I want to take it a step back and let our listeners learn a little bit more about you. And if you don't mind, just talk about your history in racing. Has it always been late models, and has NASCAR always been the goal? Like, is this something you saw yourself doing 3-4 years ago, or just walk us through what it's been like for you here, just growing up and getting into racing in general?
I started started when I was 4. Just started out in small kitty cat snowmobiles and kind of worked my way up through go-karts and micro sprints. And we always did it at our local track here in Gleason. And I just always did the ice racing. And we built all our machines in-house here at our shop. And we always did really well. And I was successful at it, but kind of wanted to grow in racing, see what else was out there. So we started in asphalt when I was 16. We started out in 4 cylinders, ran that for, I think, 3 or 4 years. Became successful. Then we bought a pro late model, ran that at State Park Speedway. We had like 6 feature wins in our first year. And then after that, I've been super lates ever since 2016 on. So
shout out State Park Speedway.
Yeah, for sure. Just always been honestly growing. I think when you went to the racetrack years ago, I remember just watching the super lates, like, oh man, I hope I can, get one someday, or just have a chance at running one or driving one. And now it's like, it's just cool that as many cars as we have and what we've been able to build at Justin Mondeik Racing and just be competitive. But I think once you grow in racing, you always look at the NASCAR aspect. And I don't know if I'm ever going to be that full-time guy, right? But you don't really know unless you try. And that's kind of what this is all about. And I've always said I wanted to do it a few times just to say I did it, to get that experience, because I feel like we've deserved it and worked hard to get to this point. So don't really know where it's going to go, but you can't win unless you try. And that's kind of our mindset. And if we don't get any more races after this, well, then we're content with that too. And just happy to have this opportunity that everybody's put together.
Well, you did a great job on Thursday moving through the pack and at a difficult track like Bristol. But you mentioned, wanting to get to a full-time if that opportunity is there. My question for you is, if you do get to full-time NASCAR, what will your late model look like? Will you still run late models at all? Will it be every once in a while, once or twice a year? Kind of what will that look like?
Yeah, I would think the super late stuff would probably take a little bit of a back seat. I would think we'd still at least run close to 15 shows a year in the super. I mean, this year we had close to 25 not doing any truck races. So I don't really anticipate us not running a super at all. It would definitely be more than once or twice a year, but honestly don't really know what that looks like, right? It's like I have a full-time job with my primary sponsor right now, Ager Industries, and it's like they've been really good at working with my schedule, but it's a lot of time off and a lot of working on race schedules and race cars and you name it, but don't really know what the future holds. But there's definitely always going to be a place for us, I guess I should say, in the late model world, because we just enjoy it so much. I enjoy winning races, and we have a lot of good longtime partners that we have great relationships with that we want to continue.
Final 2 questions for you here, Justin. First one is, Wisconsin is huge for short track racing. A lot of great tracks around the state, Slinger, Madison, all kinds of them. What's the best track in your opinion in the state of Wisconsin?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I got to be careful how I answer that, because I'm going to have a lot of track owners coming after me. But honestly, all of them really. I know that's a cliche way to answer it, but Slinger Speedway has always been a track that we've struggled at over the years. But I feel like it's just a totally different driving style. But I feel like that did help me for Bristol. That's really the only closest thing that I've had comparable to that. But I think like Dells Raceway Park and Madison International and La Crosse, I mean, really all of them. I mean, we love the tracks here in central Wisconsin too, right? Golden Sands and Marshfield and Wausau, who knows what's going to happen next year. But all of them do a really good job. But if you ask me what my favorite track is, I might have to say Elko's might be in my top 5 now after Saturday. So it's been so long since.
There we go.
Yeah, it's been so long since we've been there. I was there back in, 2016, 2017, whenever the last time we were there. And I remembered it was a beautiful place, but as far as like how to drive it and all that, it's like you kind of forget after that many years. And obviously it wasn't really good for us, but I guess I don't really have like a best track in Wisconsin. We do a lot of traveling in the off season. different tracks across the country, and we try to kind of cherry pick the bigger races, right? Whether it's New Smyrna for Speed Weeks or the Rattler 250 at South Alabama. But honestly, the Midwest is where it's at. I think that's why a lot of, whether they're from out west or down south, they come up north, is just because pound per pound, I think we have the best race car drivers in the country on a weekly basis.
Absolutely. I love you mentioned New Smyrna. I didn't even know you've raced there.
Yeah.
I went to college in Florida, and we used to go over to New Smyrna all the time.
Really? Yeah, we ran Speed Weeks
great.
3 years in a row from like 2020 to 2022. 3 years
Wow,
in a
you
row.
going back? You going back anytime soon and doing that again?
I don't know. Maybe we'll see how the year goes. We'll probably look at going back to the Rattler, I would think, but we'll see what the off season brings, depending maybe if we have truck opportunities at Daytona, maybe we'll bring the Super down too and have fun for a few days as long as we're down there, but too early to tell at this point.
Absolutely. Well, I did have the one last question for you real quick. I'll throw this one in real quick because this is something that's near and dear to mine and Klon's heart here. We've talked a lot about New Smyrna and the fact that we need cup drivers racing during speed weeks at New Smyrna. We need as many out there as we possibly can. That's something that we're like really passionate about. Wouldn't it be so cool if during speed weeks people could go, and of course you got the 500, but before that, you go out to the late model track and you get to see these guys like Chase Elliott. You get to see these guys like Kyle Larson racing late models versus your local racers. How cool would that be?
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. I just don't know who's going to supply the cars, right? I mean, some of the bigger teams, I guess, could supply. There's still got to be money exchanged, of course, on the backside. But no, it would be cool. I think they try to get, I know what the Stars National Series went there this year. I think Elliott maybe and one other Cup Series driver ran it. But no, it's definitely cool. And I think what gets lost in it is like how good the short track drivers are, because most of the time when the Cup drivers come in, most of the time they don't do the best. Normally the locals will beat them, but I can understand that a little more now because like the Cup cars are so different from the old style race cars that we do now. But I think just people sometimes don't appreciate how good super late model drivers are, and if you don't do it all the time, it's easy to lose that edge.
Absolutely. And our last question for you here, it's kind of a two-parter here. Number one, who was your favorite driver growing up? And number two, you spend a lot of time on the road traveling around to races and stuff. What is the gas station stop? What do you get when you go to the gas station? And who was your childhood favorite NASCAR driver?
I would say my childhood driver would have to be Dale Sr., but I was pretty young, right? So then I kind of gravitated to Junior, right? So I would say growing up, it definitely would be Dale Jr. In today's world, it'd be Kyle Larson just because he can drive anything. He's super humble and cool and just really someone that you can look up to and what he does in racing. As far as a racetrack or a gas station stop, I would probably say, I guess you really can't argue. You probably got to say Quick Trip, right? So probably there. And then normally like if
gotta go Quick Trip.
Yep. If we're on the road, normally my morning stack would be a Propel, and then normally like a cake donut, and then like a bag of beef jerky or something. I know super healthy, but got to get the
this
treats.
guy's got it.
It's good stuff. It's good stuff. It's great stuff. Well, then that must have been cool with you mentioning that Dale Jr. was your favorite driver growing up. That must have been cool there. He was there this whole weekend with you.
Yeah, no, it was cool to see him back on the racetrack, and I don't know how he changed his helmet on pit road like that.
That was absurd.
Got a lot more experience than what we have, but it's just cool to see those guys, out on the racetrack again, and hopefully he'll continue to do it with some of his sponsors. But just cool. It's iconic to be at Bristol, and it was just a really cool opportunity, and looking forward to Kansas and seeing where all this goes.
Absolutely, buddy. Well, you're our first interview here on the podcast. We appreciate you so much for carving out time during your busy weeks here in between races.
And I appreciate you working with me. It's just been insane. I mean, like last week with Bristol, we get back at, we got back to the hotel about 12:30, and then 3 hours later we head to the airport to fly back home, and then tomorrow we head over to Minneapolis and fly out early Thursday morning, and then got to come back for a wedding on Saturday, and it's been pretty wide open. And then you get on into Oktoberfest, and don't know if we're going to Talladega or not, or what that all.
And you're racing at Elko, winning there. I mean, yeah, you don't have an off switch. That's what it sounds like.
No,
that's great.
when you're dead, right?
Exactly.
right.
I love it. I love it. Well, Justin, again, we appreciate you for coming on, buddy, and best of luck this weekend at Kansas. We'll be pulling for you.
Sounds good. I appreciate it. Yeah, anytime you guys need me on or something, just let me know. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Have a great rest of your day.
All right, you guys too. Thanks.
All right, bye. All right, that was Justin Mondeik, driver of the O2 truck this last weekend at Bristol. Now going to be racing at Kansas this upcoming week. First interview underway here, Klon. That went great.
That guy's a stud.
He's great. Isn't he awesome?
Say, man, that was awesome. Yeah,
he's great.
Awesome. So cool.
Yeah,
It's always one of those things like, and for people listening that aren't quite familiar, like you watch these races on TV all the time. And even if you watch Thursday night, like you don't get a 10-minute special on who Justin is. Like they don't sit you down and show you like, oh, here's this guy. And
but here at the Speeding in the Pits podcast, we'll give you that special.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just cool to actually get to see that there's a person. Not only is there just a person sitting inside the truck, but like who that is and talking to them. That's always so cool to me to get to learn more about the inside of the sport, and just a phenomenal dude. I mean, come on, that was awesome. So
yeah, Justin's great. I met Justin. He races up here in the area. He mentioned State Park Speedway. I gave the shout out there. And yeah, got to follow him a bunch this year because we did a whole State Park Speedway special at News 9, and got to spend a lot of time with Justin this race season. And he's a great guy. He's a heck of a racer. Does a great job. When they had their final race at State Park Speedway, Mark Martin came up and promoted it and everything like that. Got people hyped about it. Got people out to the track. He actually signed Justin's car before he raced in it. So his late model was autographed by Mark. So that was cool too. But yeah, Justin's a great guy, but he will be racing at Kansas this upcoming weekend. Hopefully, I didn't even know about the Talladega thing. Hopefully he gets to go to Talladega. That would be absurdly cool.
Hopefully he's full-time next year. Are you kidding?
Yeah, that too. Yeah. Crazy stuff going on there. He's a whole lot more important than I am, that's for sure.
Yeah, and apparently very comfortable at going 180 miles an hour, which just
can you imagine that?
I'll just show up and do that. That's no big deal.
It's crazy. I mean, like, we're big NASCAR fans. We've been watching this our entire lives, but like, can you imagine? Have you ever done anything like that? Have you ever done like the Richard Petty experience or anything like that? I've never done any of those either. I've always wanted to, but I just can't imagine what it would be like to take a turn at 180 miles an hour. Like, that just sounds electric.
And all those people out there too that tell you that, oh, I went 120 in my car on the freeway. Like, what he's about to do this weekend is not what you've done, and nor will it ever be. Like,
you got to have brass balls to do that stuff, dude.
Yeah, you and I have never done it either, but we know that like that's not something you can just go out and do. And even the Petty experience, like, yeah, that gets you close. It's the closest thing you'll ever get, but it's still not the same. You're not racing.
No, nothing's like sitting out there. Yeah, sitting out there racing with those guys, and you're in control of the car fully too. It's absurd. But we will move along here. Great interview. We're gonna look at this weekend here at Kansas. We're gonna see what wins it. We'll talk about our winner and our championship 4 here at the end, and our next 4 out. But to start it off here, Kansas this weekend. What strategy wins it? What are you looking for the drivers to be able to propel themselves to the front and go get a win?
I think it's another one of those races. It's something we're going to talk about a lot, and this isn't me bashing the next gen. The next gen's a good on mile and a half, but it's just how these races play out. It's really going to be as a successful playoff guy, you're going to need to be good in all 3 stages. Like, it's not Talladega. We'll have a different conversation, but this week you got to be good in all 3, and it starts with qualifying then. So yeah, look for guys starting up front. You're not going to start 30th and pass 20 cars and end up with points after stage 1. You're just going to have to start near the front and ride it out. But it really does make the whole weekend really important for these guys. And Kansas will put on a great race. These guys will have these cars running in every direction in the corners here. But yeah, just going to be fun to see how it plays out starting with qualifying. I think that sets the tone.
100%. And who are some drivers that you're looking at here? Give me a couple guys you think could come and sneak a win away here in the early stages of round 12.
I guess I'll give you one. So 2 came to mind there when you asked. I actually think it's easy, but Kyle Larson is very good at Kansas. I guess I'll give you 2. Kyle Larson would be my knee-jerk reaction, but I do think Denny Hamlin in a new round, we flushed the round of 16. It's all gone. All the bad luck, everything that came with it, whatever. I think he's another name to watch in Kansas. He's been good there before. But the third name that is not a playoff driver is Bubba Wallace. And
I like it.
I had the opportunity to be in the stands for this fall race last year in Kansas. And if certain things played out a little bit differently and Bubba didn't get caught up in, or I don't can't remember if he slid off a two or what it was, but ended up damaging the car a little bit through a wreck or something, maybe not quite his fault. Again, not totally sure, but he was one of the best cars in the field all day and was going to contend for the win if things stayed clean and stayed upright for him. But I would look for him to be competitive again. I think he's going to be top 10 for sure, if not top 5.
Yeah, I absolutely. And of course, you got to think of Larson when you think of I mean, at this point, any track. I mean, it's like the
It's
guy's,
everywhere.
it's Kyle Larson, he's just a stud. But I love the Denny Hamlin point you brought up, and I don't mean to keep tooting the Denny Hamlin horn because I know I did it all last week. But yeah, this is by far his best chance of the 3 races, I think, to get a win and advance himself into that round of 8. And again, like last week, I think they're just going to be full steam ahead. I think they're just going to be looking to get up through the pack, go get a win, secure themselves into the round of 8. That way, they don't have to worry about Talladega. They don't have to worry about Denny sitting back and not wanting to pass a bunch of people or getting caught up in the mess. And then they don't have to worry about Denny not being the best at the road course races. Charlotte Roval will then not matter. So I think Gabe Hart and Denny are looking at this race this Sunday and saying, it would be awesome if we could go out here and get a win. It would be huge.
Time.
So that is going to be interesting the way that one plays out. So now that we've given a couple of drivers here, I'm going to hold you to it. Who's your winner?
I'm actually going to go Denny. I am. I think, again, there's just something about flush and mojo in racing sometimes, momentum, the whole thing. When things are bad, they're all bad. When things are good, they're all good. And I do think Denny is somebody that we're going to be talking about in Phoenix here in 7 more weeks. So I think he just punches that ticket to the round of 8 this weekend.
Well, I love the pick, and strictly off of purposes of not just following suit there, I was going to take Denny, but I will go in a different direction. This is a guy who was quiet last week, had a very loud regular season. Give me Tyler Reddick. I mean, this is a guy who for the last couple of weeks hasn't won the race last year. Yep. And this is a guy for the last couple of weeks who really hasn't made a ton of noise, just done what he needed to get through. And that 45 team, I think people are forgetting how dangerous they are. So give me Tyler Reddick heading into this weekend. I think he's an incredible driver and can drive his way up to the front and go win this thing. So
absolutely.
With that being said, we are now coming into the round of 12 here. After this, we'll have 8. Who are your next 4 out?
It pains me to say it, Wyatt, and it's because it's so boring. But if you look at the round of 12 right now and the 8 guys that are on the plus side of the bubble, that is one heck of an all-star team.
They're not going anywhere.
Out of
is
that
that what you're
8.
saying?
That bottom 4, if one of those 4 would make it between Cindric, Suarez, Bowman, and Briscoe, I wouldn't be totally shocked, I guess. But I got to say all 4 of those guys are the ones out. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. Like, being one of the 12 best guys here is a really good company to be in. But, man, any of those 8 guys could win the championship, no problem. And I wouldn't be at all shocked. And I think the next 4 guys, unfortunately, just aren't quite there. So I say Cindric, Suarez, Bowman, and Briscoe are the 4 out.
Well, I didn't follow suit with you on the winner, but I am going to follow suit with you on this one. There's definitely a gap between the top 8 and these guys, and it's absolutely no disrespect to them. The thing is, these top 8 guys are just the top 8 guys in the sport. It's that simple. These are the best 8 drivers in the sport by far, all 8, like you mentioned, all 8 have a shot. You look at even the last guy of the 8 who's barely above that cut line by, I think, 6 points, Joey Logano. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Joey Logano is not going to win the championship this year because he 1000% could. Like, so
none of those guys.
Although Austin Cindric has had a really solid run here in the round of 16, I think he does get caught up in the cut here on this one. So that wraps up our episode here. We did our first interview wild success. Justin was a stud. A little bit of technical difficulties there at the front, but
Thanks for bearing with us.
Yeah, thanks for bearing with us. We pushed through them, so now we've made it to the other side. But yeah, no, great second episode. We're off to a good start here. We appreciate everybody for tuning in, liking, subscribing, everything. I think we had over 50 something views on episode 1, so we appreciate all the people that took time out of their day to listen to us yap about left turns.
That's right. There's nothing better to listen to about left turns either, though. It's the two of us.
Absolutely. Exactly. So, with that being said, episode 2 now concluded. We will join back next week. And I don't know if we have an interview yet for that. I'm trying to line something up. I don't want to say anything and it fall through or anything. So we'll hold off on that. Stay tuned. But yeah, great episode coming up next week as well. I'm sure we'll have a lot of drama from this weekend to talk about. And we'll start looking ahead to Talladega. So that's going to be fun. This round of 12 is going to be interesting. But again, thank you guys for joining. Be sure to give us a like and a subscribe. We appreciate that very much. And peace out. Thanks for listening to the Speeding in the Pits podcast.